Night Tide, with its boundless power, ties these two together in a love tainted by strange, sinister terror. The siren song of the sea, pulsating like a bongo beat, calling, driving the sea people.
You saw how she looked at me, how she spoke to me. She's one of them. She's one of the sea people, and Johnny, I'm so afraid.
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I know they're gonna catch me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, Doctor, help me!
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're gonna make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first!
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Hi there, welcome to the American International Podcast. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And in this episode, we're going to head down to the pier and see what's in the tank as we watch Night Tide from 1961.
Night Tide was written and directed by Curtis Harrington. It was produced by Aram Kantarian for Virgo Productions and initially released by Filmgroup and eventually distributed by American International Pictures.
Night Tide stars Dennis Hopper as Johnny Drake, Linda Lawson as Mora, Gavin Muir as Captain Samuel Murdock, Luana Anders as Ellen Sands, Marjorie Eaton as Madame Romanovitch, Tom Dillon as Ellen's grandfather, the merry-go-round operator. Also appearing are H.E. West as Lieutenant Henderson, Ben Roseman as Bruno, and Cameron as the Water Witch. Night Tide opens with credits over the tide coming in. A lonely sailor looks out over the edge of the pier at the water and then walks down the boardwalk to see the attractions. There's carnival games, a photo booth where he takes his picture, and he finally lands in the Blue Grotto, a jazz club, which is crowded with an audience taking in the flute-tastic show. The sailor looks a little wary as he starts down the stairs. I got the feeling that this wasn't exactly what he expected when he went through the door. But he scans the room, he goes over to the bar, grabs a beer, decides he likes the music, does a little bop as he walks to a table just to the side of the stage. He scans the room and notices a pretty brunette sitting alone at a table, and he ventures over and asks if he can join her. From where he was sitting behind the stage, he could only see the players' backs. She allows him to sit. Within 3 seconds, he's pestering her. Great combo, huh? She says she wants to listen to the music. There's a pause. Yeah, this is great music. She says she likes it. He says he wants to buy her a drink. She declines. He insists, and she has to say no yet again. The combo starts playing a new song as a mysterious older woman walks into the club, comes up to the table, and says something to the woman. But what she says isn't in a language I can understand. No, but somebody translated it, and apparently she's saying that she's going to meet her people soon, or something like that. The younger woman looks distressed. The sailor notices and asks the young woman who that woman was and what she said. The young woman says she doesn't know and asks Johnny to pay her bill, handing him some cash as she rushes out of the club. The sailor throws the cash on the bar and follows the woman outside. "Why are you following me?" she asks. He explains that she left so fast that he didn't have a chance to get her digits. He'd like to see her again. "It's impossible," she says. He asks if he could just walk with her. He says she shouldn't be out alone on a night like this, and he knows that woman upset her, and he figures she might like someone to talk to. He's just going to lay out 5 or 6 reasons, and if any one of them is a yes, he's in. He tells her that he'll go with her, and then says, "Is this the way?" So she grits her teeth and allows him to dog her steps. Not gonna lie, he's a real creep in this part of the movie. They stroll along and find the merry-go-round at the end of the pier. She tells him that's where she lives. The dopey sailor asks if she lives inside a wooden horse. She chuckles and says no, her apartment is upstairs. He asks if it's noisy, and she says yes, but she loves the music. The man introduces himself as Johnny Drake, and he learns that her name is Mora. She says she has to go in now. "Aren't you going to invite me in?" says Johnny. "For at least a little while?" She says that he can't without actually using the word no. Then he grabs her and tries to kiss her, once again asking to come up for a little while. She says that she has to go. So Johnny asks if he can see her again, and she tells him to come by tomorrow around 11 for breakfast. And with that, they bid each other goodnight. So the next day, Johnny returns to the merry-go-round. The merry-go-round operator is prepping for the day. Sunday's his big day. Johnny asks if he could take a closer look, and the operator tells him to go ahead. Don't cost anything to look. As Johnny admires the woodwork of the carved horses, the operator tells him they were all hand-carved in Bavaria. A young woman comes in and asks her dad for the cash box key. He introduces the young woman as his granddaughter to Johnny. So even though she repeatedly calls him dad throughout the movie, he's her grandpa? Pleasantries are exchanged, and Johnny says he's got to go meet someone. The operator asks him who he's here to meet. "Just a girl named Mora," says Johnny. "Mora? I haven't seen you around here before. You known her long?" the nosy operator asks. "A little while," says Johnny. Johnny excuses himself and goes upstairs, passing Bruno on the narrow stairway. He finds Mora's door and knocks, and she invites him in, leaving the front door open, as people tend to do in this movie. Johnny admires the place. There's seashells and starfish everywhere. Mora tells him she collects things from the ocean.
She takes his hat and tells him they'll be eating out on the balcony, and Johnny is impressed with the view.
So was I.
It's a view of the seashore because they're out on the pier.
Looks like a really lovely apartment for being above a merry-go-round, and if I could trade places with her, I think I would.
They both sit, and Johnny proposes a toast to themselves. I hope you like fish, says Mora. She caught some fresh mackerel this morning. She loves seafood, lobster, crab, and sea urchin. Johnny's never had sea urchin, but Mora raves about it. She says you just scoop it up like a pomegranate.
Johnny asks if she works, and Mora's surprised that he doesn't know her profession by her name. She works on the pier. Johnny tries to guess what she does there, but gets it wrong every time. She tells him that she's a mermaid. A what? Johnny says. Mora explains the gig. Fake fishtail tank, 25 cents a look.
It's a living.
Johnny asks if she ever gets tired of it. Sometimes, she says, but it's restful anyway, and I think I trade jobs with her too.
But Mora doesn't want to keep talking about herself. She wants to know more about Johnny. What does he do? He says he's a member of the U.S. Navy, and he laughs as he says this.
Well, he's wearing a sailor suit.
Then he explains that his father left him and his mother when he was young. Then when his mother died, he decided he wanted to see the world, so he joined the Navy. Only he hasn't seen anything yet.
It was the best way to get out of Denver. There's a gull circling overhead, attracted by their fishy breakfast. It lands, and Mora takes it onto her lap and pets it like a cat. Luckily for them, its jaw's been wired shut.
Where'd you learn to do that? Johnny asks. I don't know, says Mora. On the island where I was born, I guess. Now Johnny is walking Mora to work, and as they head out along the pier, Mora points out the sign advertising her as a mermaid. Johnny says he'd like to see her in full getup. You will, promises Mora. Johnny wonders why the people don't recognize her, and Mora says that people just don't pay attention until Captain Murdock starts his spiel, and then Mora explains that Captain Murdock is her boss. They go to the entrance of the attraction where Captain Murdock is asleep, and Mora shakes him awake. Caught you, Captain Murdock, she says. He asks Mora why she's late. I'm not late enough to make any difference, says Mora. She's going to go put her costume on, so she leaves Johnny with Captain Murdock.
Murdock quizzes Johnny on his service. Johnny hasn't been sailing very long, and he's only been as far as the Hawaiian Islands. Murdock was also a seaman in the English Navy, and later he was the captain of his own ship, where he found Mora on one of his voyages. Murdock invites Johnny to visit him sometime for the whole story. Johnny says sure. Next time he is on Liberty, he'll do just that. Murdock gives him his card, telling him that he lives in Venice, and then Mora calls out to Johnny that she's ready. Johnny goes into the tent, and Captain Murdock begins his patter.
It's the most unenthusiastic carnival barking I've ever heard. So Johnny walks in and looks in the tank, and yep, Mora's there, and she's a mermaid.
She's combing her flowing hair as the waves lap over her.
Now it's suddenly the next weekend, and Johnny is taking a bus to Santa Monica Station, and Mora meets him there. Together they head to the beach and set down a towel.
Johnny finishes his meal and flops onto his belly on a beach towel. Mora wants to go swimming, but Johnny subscribes to the old wives' tale that it's dangerous to swim right after eating. Mora does not. Johnny sits up and asks Mora what Captain Sam's story is.
He's just a lonely old man, she says. Do you know him well? Asks Johnny. Pretty well, says Mora. He is her employer, after all. Sometimes, she says, she thinks he's her only friend. What about me? Asks Johnny. Well, of course you, says Mora. Only she doesn't think that Johnny knows her very well. He begs to differ, but she says he can't possibly know her after only 3 meetings. But she'd like him to know her better. She's not afraid of that. Why should you be afraid? Asks Johnny.
She asks Johnny what Sam told him about her. Johnny says that Sam said he found her on an island. Mora confirms this. On the island of Mykonos, she was an orphan and he adopted her. So he's her guardian. Mora knows he's a strange man, but she's still grateful to him. He was so good to her.
They look out at the water, and Mora tells Johnny how much she loves the sea, but that she's afraid of it too. I guess we're all afraid of what we love, says Johnny. He looks at her sitting beside him and tells her she's awfully far away. Then she lays back and they kiss as the ocean waves crash onto the beach.
And now we're at a bongo party on the beach.
Johnny and Mora are there, and Mora comes forward to do a weird solo interpretive dance as Johnny stares at her, dragging on his cigarette.
Then we see the mysterious older woman from the club appearing by the rocks. Then she approaches the drum circle. The drumming stops and Mora collapses. Johnny goes to her and asks, was it that woman? What woman? Asks Mora. And now it's the next day at the merry-go-round. Ellen is serving coffee to her grandpa, dad, and tea to Madame Romanovitch, who is seated on a bench next to the merry-go-round.
She's the pier's resident psychic. Johnny comes in, and Ellen runs to get him a cup of coffee, while Johnny sits on the bench next to Madame Romanovitch. She tells him that it's frustrating that everyone is using tea bags these days. She can't read people's tea leaves when they do that. Then Ellen returns with that cup of coffee, hands it to Johnny, and sits down next to him.
She gets Johnny's backstory. He tells it to her and to us again. We find out this is his first time on the coast. And then Lieutenant Henderson of the Venice Police Department arrives to talk to Ellen's grandpa dad. Lieutenant Henderson doesn't want any coffee, though. He just wants to know if either of them have seen anything new or unusual since the last time they've talked, but they haven't. Granddad asks the detective if he's found any clues yet and says that he's happy that the police haven't given up yet. And then the detective leaves and Johnny asks them to decode that conversation.
Ellen says that he was asking about Mora. What about Mora? Asks Johnny. Madame Romanovitch tells Ellen that she shouldn't be telling tales out of school, but Ellen thinks Johnny ought to know what's been going on, and her grandfather agrees. It's not a secret. Ellen kneels down in front of Johnny and tells him that in the past 2 years, Mora's had 2 boyfriends, and they've both been killed. They disappeared, and their bodies were washed up on shore a few days later. Madame Romanovitch interrupts to say that nothing's been proved that Mora had anything to do with their deaths. I know, says Ellen, but if she didn't kill them, then she brings bad luck, and that's almost as bad.
Try introducing that in a court of law. Ellen says that she bets that Mora didn't tell Johnny about that, did she? But before Johnny can answer, 2 things happen at once. First, the phone rings. Granddad answers it and calls out that it's for Johnny. Johnny thinks that's funny because nobody knows he's there. Also happening, 3 children arrive who want to ride the merry-go-round, so Ellen has to go and assist them.
Johnny goes to the phone and finds there's no one on the line. Johnny looks out the window and sees that mysterious older woman hurrying away down the street. Johnny says that he has to go, something's come up, but thanks for the coffee. Madame Romanovitch stops him on his way out, telling him that he should stop by and see her for a reading. Johnny pursues the woman throughout the town. She seems oblivious to this, though he's only about 15 paces behind her. He follows her through a village, over docks, all the way to Venice. He follows her around the corner of a building and finds that she's vanished. A rocking chair rocks by itself, and a small girl is staring at him. Johnny asks the girl if she's seen a woman come through here, but the girl just shakes her head and runs away.
Johnny looks at the card that Captain Murdock gave him and sees that his address is right there. The woman in black glares at him from inside her second-story flat as Johnny rings the bell on her first-story apartment. Captain Murdock answers the door and invites Johnny in.
As they sit down, the captain lights a cigar and explains that the story he has to tell is difficult to tell to young people. They tend to have preconceived notions about things, but what he has to tell Johnny is that Johnny is in danger if he continues to see Mora. Danger? From you? Asks Johnny. No, says Murdock, from Mora. Johnny doesn't understand, so Murdock explains that Mora may be overtaken by sudden compulsions to take Johnny's life. He suggests it would be in Johnny's best interest to break things off before it's too late. Then, as Murdock empties a bottle of liquor into his cup, he asks Johnny if he wouldn't mind going to the cabinet and getting another.
Johnny pokes around for the hooch and finds a hand in a jar. It's the hand of a thief, says Murdock, from Arabia, as per tradition. Johnny finds the bottle and brings it to Murdock, demanding more intel on Mora. Murdock mentions the Greek legends of the sirens. They're half human and half people of the sea. Female sirens are sometimes called mermaids, just like your fake mermaid display, says Johnny.
Yes, says Murdock, but that's a fake, a sideshow illusion, based on the legends. But where do the stories come from? The truth, says Murdock. Ancient truth. Living truth. Says Johnny. What does this have to do with Mora? Murdock points to a door across the room and upstairs. That was her room, says Murdock. She resided there with him, but he didn't know that she belonged to that ancient race, or what she would become. Murdock falls back into his chair. Johnny says he has just one question. There's a woman who's been bothering Mora, and he thinks she's here. There's no woman, mumbles the captain. I'm all alone. And he starts to snore.
Johnny gets up and starts looking around, bumping into a cat statue that meows at him, and then goes up to Mora's old room, but it's empty.
It's a small room, and the windows are open. It's very windy in there.
And then Johnny goes to visit Mora. He tells her the story, and then he doesn't believe it, but she says it's true. You've seen the woman, she says. She told her that it's time for Mora to go to her people in the sea. Johnny sits Mora down and gently mansplains that he knows that she believes that, but she's wrong. These things just don't happen.
Mora calls him, and all Americans, naive. Johnny asks if everything Murdock had told him was true. Almost everything, says Mora. She explains that she knows it to be true because of the way she feels, the way the sea calls to her, and the way the moonlight touches her. She hands Johnny a conch shell. She explains that when she came here, she always carried a shell just like this. That way she always kept the ocean near her.
He holds the conch shell to his ear. He can't hear what she hears, but says it does remind him of his own mother.
She says she's afraid, and Johnny tries to comfort her. He's still not understanding all this, but he tells her they'll work it out together.
Now it's time for Johnny to visit Madame Romanovitch. She's pleased to see him. She actually willed him to come, and it worked. She knows he has a problem, and she's going to help him.
She asks him if he's ever had a tarot reading before. No, says Johnny. He says he's never been to a fortune teller before. And she asks him not to use that phrase, fortune teller. It's so vulgar. She prefers to be known as a chiromancer or a clairvoyant.
Then she lays out the tarot cards. The first one represents him. He is the Knight of Cups, innocent and searching. She lays out more cards in a cross. She shakes her head. His cards are strange. There's a moon card that represents a journey into the unknown. The moon card is next to the hanged man, life in suspension. A great awakening is possible.
Johnny doesn't know what any of this means. Madame Romanovitch says that after death comes resurrection, which confuses Johnny even more. Is that good or bad, he asks. But Madame Romanovitch tells him that the cards don't lend themselves to oversimplification. He just wants to know how Mora fits into this.
Madame Romanovitch says that Mora is caught in a vortex of evil, and Johnny is in grave danger. The answer to what kind of danger, though, lies in his heart, and she can't tell him. Then she charges him $2. $2 was probably a lot in those days.
Yeah, I'm sure. Johnny returns to the merry-go-round and discusses the results of his reading with Ellen. She tells him not to take much stock in anything a fortune teller says. I don't, says Johnny, but he still wants to know more about Mora. He keeps hearing the same things over and over from different people, and it's starting to make him think.
Oh no.
Even Ellen told him stories about Mora. Ellen says she was just repeating what the papers had said. Then she asks Johnny if he's in love with Mora. Yes, says Johnny. It's funny about love. It can happen rather suddenly, says Ellen. Like when you're lonely and you're looking for someone.
Wonder who she's talking about. Johnny's not paying attention, though. He's worried about Mora, because she does believe that story. Not that she killed the boys, but Johnny doesn't elaborate as to what she actually does believe. Ellen tells Johnny not to worry about it. Maybe things will work out better than he thinks.
She offers him some more coffee, but he says he's got to get going. Mora will be getting off work soon. But he thanks her for listening.
And then she looks at him with puppy dog eyes as he goes. Next we see Johnny taking in the sun, sitting behind a mountain overlooking the ocean. And then he goes to Mora's.
Johnny goes up to Mora's room, and she's already there in the bath. Johnny talks to her through the door. She asks if he's tired, and he says yes, so she tells him to go lie down for a while. Johnny asks if she's going to be long, and she says no, not long. Johnny lies down on a wicker couch and starts to drift off. Mora comes out, wrapped in a towel, and she sits beside him. He looks down and sees a fishtail where her legs should be. She pulls his head up and kisses him, and her arms turn to tentacles. Johnny is suffocating from the tentacles strangling him when he awakens from the dream. He stands up to go check on Mora. The bathroom door is open and the tub is empty, and Johnny follows Mora's wet footprints outside and down the steps. He shouts her name as he walks under the pier.
He keeps shouting for her and finally hears her calling back to him. He searches until he finds her leaning against a support beam, being battered by the surf. She's wearing a bathrobe. He wades over to her, picks her up, and carries her back to the beach, comforting her all the way. The next morning, he wakes on a pillow next to her bed like a pet dog. He stands up next to the bed and wakes her up. She says she's tired, but wants to make him breakfast. He tells her to stay in bed.
She asks how he is, and he says he's pretty sore from the night before. So she tells him to get a massage at the end of the pier. Johnny says he'll only go if she promises to get some rest while he's gone.
She doesn't say either way, but we see dark thoughts racing through her mind as he goes.
Now we see Johnny getting a rub down from a masseuse, an older gentleman. You're all tied up in knots, kid, he says. Girlfriend not treating you right? No, I'm just a little tense, that's all I guess, says Johnny.
And the masseuse is disappointed.
The curtain to the steam room opens and Captain Murdock comes out wearing a bath sheet. What a delightful surprise, says Murdock when he sees Johnny laying on the table. You want me to pound you later? asks the masseuse. No, I'd like to forego that pleasure, says Murdock.
Sam asks Johnny about the conversation they had before. Has Mora been acting weird lately? Johnny lies and says no. Murdock says that Johnny must be careful now in the time of a full moon, when the tide's pull is the strongest. Johnny asks for clarification, but Sam has already vanished back into the steam room. He'll get his pounding later.
Now we're back at Mora's, and she's telling Johnny that she's decided that last night she must have been sleepwalking, and she doesn't wish to discuss the matter any further.
Just squash those feelings down really hard. She's going to forget everything.
And Johnny's into that idea.
Mora, who's been cleaning scuba gear this whole time, says the moon is about to be full, so she thought that they could go diving together. She knows the perfect spot.
Johnny says he doesn't think that's such a good idea. It's too cold, he says, desperate for an excuse. But the water's warm, says Mora, and she gives him puppy dog eyes until he gives in.
She says she only gets a little time with him on the weekends. She needs to rest, she can do that during the week. Johnny asks about the place where they're going to dive, and Mora says it's not far from here. And now it's the designated afternoon. Johnny and Mora ride their little speedboat out to the spot in the middle of the ocean. Looks like nowhere in particular, but Mora's been there before. Johnny asks why this spot, and Mora says there are beautiful reefs here.
Johnny looks nervous, and Mora takes his hand. Stay close to me, she says. We mustn't become separated. They dive down together and swim above the reefs.
This part of the movie would be so much better if it was color.
Then Mora pulls a knife from a sheath on her leg and cuts Johnny's air hose. Johnny rushes to the surface, desperate for air. Mora watches, then swims away.
Johnny heaves himself over the side of the boat, sobbing because his lady just tried to drown him. And later we see him sitting in the boat, wearing a hoodie, shivering. He must have been there for hours because it seems to be nighttime now.
Yeah, he was waiting for Mora, but she never returned. Then we find he has checked into the Ocean Park Motel, and he's sleeping fitfully. He has a dream where he sees Mora sitting on the beach. She has a fishtail and is looking into a hand mirror. Johnny goes to her and sees his own reflection in the mirror. He tries to pull Mora up to where he is, but she has turned into that mysterious older woman and is cackling at him.
Johnny drops her onto the rocks.
Johnny awakens in a sweat, and we get the impression he's been in the room for some time.
And now it's the next day. Some days later, we don't know. He's sitting on his bed when there's a knock at the door. It's the paper being delivered. He opens his door to get it and then sits down on his bed to read it. The amusement pier is celebrating its 20th anniversary. Among the attractions are Mora the Mermaid. We hear a scream, and then we're on the chute, where people are shrieking as the ride goes up and down.
Johnny nervously walks down the pier toward the mermaid attraction, very aware of the sounds around him. Captain Murdock is there, trying to draw up the crowd with his usual lack of enthusiasm.
I think it's even more lacking this time than before.
The sign advertising the mermaid attraction no longer has the words "alive" on it. Captain Murdock pays no attention as Johnny puts a quarter in front of him and goes inside. We see the same 3 kids from the merry-go-round there. They're laughing at the mermaid in the tank.
We also notice that it has started to storm. The children leave, and Johnny goes up to the edge of the tank and looks down to see the lifeless face of Mora. He can't believe his eyes. And then Sam enters the tent, pistol drawn. Murdock says that he knew Johnny would return. The murderer always returns to the scene of the crime. Not that this is where he killed her, but, well, he knew that Johnny would come back to see the results of his monstrous act.
But I loved her, mumbles Johnny. What does Johnny know about love? Murdock says that he's loved her since she was a child.
Ugh.
And now Johnny will pay for what he's done.
Johnny asks Murdock how he found Mora. Murdock says that she wanted to be found. She was such a sweet girl child. And then he shouts, "Why? Why?"
Murdock points the gun and fires. Johnny ducks and pushes the tank/coffin over. It tips onto Murdock, sending Mora's body to the floor. 2 policemen are out on the pier. They hear the shots and are puzzled. The shooting gallery is supposed to be closed tonight. The sounds seem to be coming from Sam's mermaid exhibit, so they go to investigate. There they see Johnny cowering against the wall. They shine their lights around and see Murdock lying unconscious on the floor, with Mora, decked out as a mermaid, lying dead, draped over him in a puddle of water.
At the Venice police station, Johnny is shown into Lieutenant Henderson's office, where Captain Murdock is seated. Henderson says that Murdock wanted Johnny there for his statement. Murdock says that first, whatever horrible, wicked thing he did, it was done for love of Mora. Oh, that's okay then. He's loved her since he found her, but then he realized that she would grow up and leave him, and he couldn't have that.
So he decided that to keep that from happening, he'd make her totally dependent on him. So he planted in her mind as a small child the legend of the Sea People, and that she was one of them, and one day she'd be asked to rejoin them. And because of this, she could never engage in relationships with regular people. But as she grew older, his love wasn't enough, and she wanted more. And when she began having relations with young men, Murdock cut them off the only way he knew how. He admits to killing those 2 young men and persuading Mora that somehow she had done it, under some influence of the Sea People.
But even after that, she still wanted her independence. She got her own apartment, and then she met Johnny. So his experiment failed. Or did it exceed too well? Instead of her repeating the pattern with Johnny, she decided to embrace the rapture of the depths. Murdock says, "Isn't that right?" Johnny shrugs in agreement, maybe. Murdock says, "You loved her," and Johnny agrees. So Murdock says, "Then you know how I feel," and Johnny agrees with that too.
Lieutenant Henderson asks Murdock about the mysterious woman. Murdock doesn't know anything about a woman. "You know, the one I asked you about. The one I followed to your house," says Johnny. But still, Murdock pleads ignorance. "I've told you everything," says Murdock. "May I go?" Henderson summons a guard to either take him to his cell or walk him home. I'm not quite sure which.
Alone with Henderson, Johnny says that he did see the woman. She wasn't a figment of Mora's imagination. Johnny says it's almost as if there was some truth to Mora's story. Henderson thinks that Sam was probably protecting the mysterious woman. And then a clerk buzzes into Henderson's office. The shore patrol is there to pick up Johnny.
As Johnny goes to leave, he is surprised to see Ellen waiting for him. She had heard he was here, so she came down to see if there was anything she could do for him. She says she's sorry about Mora and hands him a cup of coffee, sort of.
Or he takes her coffee from her, not sure. And then she shoots her shot one last time. Maybe on his next leave, he can take a ride on her merry-go-round.
"I'd like that," says Johnny, patting her on the head like a puppy. But the MPs are there to escort him out because he's been AWOL for a while now. "Bye," waves Ellen. Johnny gives her a half smile, and one of the MPs gives her a funny look.
And then she watches him be escorted out of the building and to a waiting car. Before they get in the car, Johnny looks around and notices that it stopped raining. And indeed it has.
As the car drives off, a verse from Edgar Allan Poe fills the screen. "And so all the night tide, I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and bride. In her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea." Edgar Allan Poe.
From Annabelle Lee. And that's the end. Welcome back to the American International Podcast, where we're talking about Night Tide from 1961.
The film was based on an original script by Curtis Harrington, who said in his autobiography, "Nice Guys Don't Work in Hollywood, The Adventures of an Aesthete in the Movie Business," I wrote a screenplay based on an unpublished short story I had written while in France. Looking through the poems of Edgar Allan Poe, I found the perfect title, Night Tide, from Annabelle Lee.
And we're going to use a lot of information from that autobiography here. When Harrington was looking to get the film made, he said he offered the script to Roger Corman, who said he liked it, but it wasn't commercial enough for him. However, Corman agreed to help Harrington raise the money to produce the film, and offered him distribution guarantees, which allowed him to get the film lab work done on credit by Pathé Film Laboratory, as well as a bit of cash for production. Corman also convinced Aram Kantarian from MCA to front some of the money, and Kantarian and Harrington raised the rest of the $50,000 used for the production.
Harrington said Dennis Hopper was the first choice for the role of Johnny, but the role of Mora was first offered to Susan Harrison, whom he knew personally. According to Harrington, Harrison had a sleazy boyfriend who encouraged her to demand more than scale pay for the job. Still, Harrison got as far as rehearsals without committing to the project, but when Harrington demanded she decide, Harrison fled the studio in tears. In his column published October 23, 1960, Harrison Carroll said, "Aren't Susan Harrison and producer-director Curtis Harrington feuding because Susan's agents wouldn't let her appear in Night Tide? Too bad. They had been good friends for a long time."
Harrington then cast Linda Lawson as Mora. The Saginaw, Michigan News did a story on Lawson, an Ann Arbor native, saying that she had just finished filming on Night Tide. The article said Lawson, born Linda Spaziani, was singing in a Las Vegas nightclub when gossip columnist Luella Parsons suggested to the MC that he introduce her as Linda Lawson.
Harrington wanted Peter Lorre to play Captain Murdock, but Lorre would not work for such a minuscule salary. He also approached French actor Marcel Dalio before finally casting Gavin Muir.
Harrington had previously worked with actress Cameron for his 1956 short, 10 minutes long, documentary The Wormwood Star. According to Box Office Magazine, Cameron, real name Marjorie Cameron, was, quote, a sorceress acclaimed for seemingly formidable accomplishments in the long-forgotten hermetic and magical arts.
Harrington said in his autobiography that his landlady asked him to postpone the first day of filming on Night Tide, as the planned date coincided with Mercury being in retrograde. Harrington couldn't have changed the date if he wanted to, which he didn't, but he wrote that all the film from the first day's shoot, the opening scene in the jazz club, was ruined in the lab and had to be reshot.
On August 9, 1960, the LA Times reported that interiors for Night Tide were being shot by Phoenix Film Studios at Telepix in Los Angeles. According to the article, Kenneth Altos and Julian Schwartz of Phoenix Film Studios planned to erect a $2 million studio for film and television production in Phoenix, Arizona. The two thought they could, quote, cut costs of filmmaking in Phoenix, and then said, we intend to employ experienced Hollywood union technicians.
The mermaid mural for the sideshow attraction in which Mora stars was painted for the film by Paul Matheson, who was an associate of Cameron and part of her magical circle.
Filming took place on location in Venice and on Santa Monica Beach. Harrington says that it was mostly shot using a non-union crew, but a union crew was hired for 1 week so the film could be screened in theaters by projectionists who were required to refuse to show a non-union movie. The scenes at the studio-built interiors, such as Mora's apartment, the police station, and the hotel room, were shot with a minimal union crew.
Harrington said that shooting broke for lunch in the middle of the last day of shooting, during the scene where Johnny talks about the mysterious woman in black to the police chief. Harrington intended to resume shooting after lunch, but when Hopper returned from lunch, he was too inebriated to remember his lines, so Harrington decided to try again the next day. As Harrington said, Dennis staggered off set. He had brought some bimbo back from lunch, and together they got onto a motorcycle and sped away. Within an hour, we received news that Dennis had been in an accident and was in the hospital.
Harrison Carroll's syndicated Behind the Scenes in Hollywood column noted on August 31st, 1960, that, quote, the Dennis Hopper injuries in that motor scooter accident must have been more serious than reported. He still hasn't been able to finish the underwater scenes with Linda Lawson for Night Tide, end quote. We couldn't find any other mention of underwater scenes being shot after Hopper's accident. However, we did find mention of Hopper insisting on not having a stunt double for those scenes.
Harrington said they had run out of money, but had to keep renting the set while Hopper recuperated from his injuries. Aram Kantarian sought out some extra money, and a couple of weeks later, the crew resumed shooting the rest of the scene.
Must have been so frustrating. In November of 1960, Sidney Skalskis in the LA Citizen News wrote that, for censorship approval, they may have to reshoot the torrid love scenes between Dennis Hopper and Linda Lawson in Night Tide. And I'm thinking they just cut them?
The Los Angeles Mirror reported in December of 1960 that bongo drummer Chano had been signed to compose and perform a drum sequence in Night Tide. A few days later, the LA Evening Citizen News reported that renowned composer David Raskin, who wrote the music for films like Laura and The Bad and the Beautiful, had completed the score for Night Tide. The Los Angeles Times reported that an enthusiastic Raskin had consented to compose the score for a figure considerably less than his usual salary.
Though Roger Corman had initially planned to release Night Tide through his Filmgroup company, according to Harrington, Roger decided instead to give it to American International Pictures. Night Tide was released in 1963, around 2 years after the film's completion, held up by Pathé Film Laboratory because the final processing bill had not been paid. Harrington said he tried to convince Pathé that he would be able to pay them once the film was released, but was only able to acquire one print of the film, which was to be shown at both the Spoleto Film Festival in July of 1961, where Night Tide was named the top American film that year, and the Venice Film Festival a month later.
Night Tide was also entered in the Coronado Film Festival in San Diego in October of 1961. It premiered in U.S. theaters in February of 1963 on a double bill with Battle Beyond the Sun in most markets, and The Raven in a few others.
After running for more than a year as a second-billed feature, Night Tide received a New York City debut on May 24, 1964, at the 55th Street Playhouse. According to the May 13, 1964 issue of Variety, this would be the first in a series of art house openings arranged by Harrington with the consent of AIP. The event was later described in Variety as the film's U.S. premiere.
Box Office Magazine recommended theater owners dress a girl in black and have her driven around town in a vehicle sporting signage with the theater name and showtimes. They also suggested that high school teachers could give away tickets to students who could correctly identify the Poe quote used for the title.
Taglines for Night Tide include, "Temptress from the sea, loving, killing."
Was she human? Or was she a beautiful temptress from the sea, intent upon loving, consuming, and killing?
Sensual ecstasy becomes supernatural terror.
A unique experience in the weird and terrifying.
Lovers caught in a dark tide of sinister terror.
New weird hit, eerie, strange, macabre.
Harrington said that Italian critics who viewed Night Tide at the Venice Film Festival were very kind, and a communist paper called it tense and hallucinating as a nightmare. At a preview in Upland, California, Harrington said that the audience response cards were 90% excellent or good, but that, quote, Hollywood deemed Night Tide not commercial, with one producer recommending he dub the film into French to sell it as an art film. Harrington said even after Time magazine gave it a wonderfully laudatory review, saying the film emits an uncommon glow of freshness and imagination, no one in Hollywood expressed interest. It played out its modest run on the double bill, and that was the end of it. He also said elsewhere that Battle Beyond the Sun was not the right companion film for Night Tide.
Box Office Magazine called Night Tide an impressive first for Curtis Harrington, saying he attends competently to a yarn that, in the main, successfully explores the delicate and uncanny edge between dreams and realities. Young Hopper and Miss Lawson emerge a personable couple, and there's rousing support from Gavin Muir. David Raskin contributed an impressive score.
The New York Times reviewer said of Night Tide, actress Linda Lawson lushly incarnates the myth of mariner and maid that has haunted men's imaginations for more than 2,000 years.
Hay Knickerbocker in the San Francisco Chronicle said Night Tide vacillates between fantasy and reality, never quite deciding which to stress. When it is a fantasy, it is more persuasive. It achieves a commendable mood. Then reality intrudes, shattering the fragile quality which Harrington has artfully created. A firmer grasp on his material, or an insistence that one would overbalance the other, would be essential for Night Tide to acquire the form it lacks.
Harrington said he left the original print with the Cinematheque, and it was this print that was lent out to film festivals over the years. Night Tide was restored from the original negative by the Academy Film Archive in 2007. Danish director Nicholas Winding Refn purchased the negative from the director's estate and then produced a new 4K digital restoration that was released in 2020. Night Tide is currently in the public domain as the copyright for the movie was not renewed.
A musical theater adaptation with music by Nathania Wibowo and book and lyrics by Taylor Tash was featured in the 2017 New York Musical Theater Festival and premiered at the Towle Theater in Hammond, Indiana during its 2021 season.
Trying to imagine what that would be like. All right, Jeff, we've lived through the world of Night Tide a couple of times now. What are your impressions of the movie?
This feels very much like an independent film, and it was pretty much produced independently. And the feeling that I got, this is the kind of story that one of my classmates would have made back in film school, and I would have been very jealous that they came up with the concept.
Would you have been just as jealous at the execution of the concept?
Well, knowing the quality of the output from people in film school, it wouldn't be this good, but I'd be impressed with the story at least.
Yeah, I thought it was a good story as well. I just think that maybe Harrington didn't have the wherewithal to see it through to, like the one reviewer says, either he's dealing in reality or he's dealing in myth, and you can't have it both ways. And he seems to kind of want to sit on that fence until the very end, and then he falls off on the wrong side, maybe.
Oh, I don't think so. I think it still leaves you wondering. There's no real answer here because we know Captain Murdock tells two different stories. The one he tells Johnny initially and the one he does in his statement. One of those is a lie. We don't know which one. We know that there was a woman. We saw her too. And we know that she was upstairs in Murdock's apartment. He claims not to know her. So yeah, he may be protecting her, or she may be one of the sea people because we know from the translation what she had said, even though if we had just watched the film, we wouldn't.
Well, she couldn't have been.
There's no answers
illusion.
here. We don't know. We don't see Mora getting into her fishtail. We just see her with and without it. Maybe she's one of the sea people and she still doesn't know it. We don't have any real concrete answers. It just leaves it hanging. And I think that's kind of cool.
When she and Johnny are scuba diving, though, she doesn't have a fishtail then. It would be kind of cool if we had maybe caught a glimpse of it as she's swimming off forever.
But that would spoil it because we'd have the answer.
Well, the movie's almost over at that point.
Right, but we'd have the answer. We don't have an answer the way it ends, so it makes you wonder, okay, how did this happen? It doesn't matter because Dennis Hopper's going to come back and hang out with Luana Anders and live happily ever after because they're both small-minded people and they're perfect for each other.
Well, I was just thinking that what if we had seen just a glimpse where we could almost convince ourselves that her legs had turned into a tail as she swam off for the last time?
Maybe something that didn't prove anything, but looks like maybe that's a possibility.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, because I wouldn't want it concrete that, yes, she's a mermaid and this is the story. I think it's a stronger story if it doesn't answer it. I mean, it answers most of the questions saying, of course, this is a fairy tale. This is a made-up story, but there's enough loose ends that could only be cleared up if Mora was actually a mermaid. Mostly involving the mysterious woman.
I mean, we never see her do anything other than look at Mora. She says something in Greek, which we got the translation from IMDb, and it shocks Mora. But other than that, she just appears in dreams. She appears on the sidewalk. She doesn't actually do anything one way or the other than just kind of freak out Mora a little bit.
Right, but she does wind up upstairs at Captain Murdock's place. So is she working for him? Does he hire her to follow Mora around to keep her on her toes? Does he even know about her? Is he under some sort of spell? Is he involved with the sea people more than he's letting on? We don't have any of these answers.
My question was, is his love for her as creepy as it does seem to be to me?
Probably, but we seem rather at home at the man's bathhouse as well.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that scene made us laugh because it did seem like there's a lot of pounding involved. I don't know. I'm not sure that I agree with you on that. If they had committed to her being a mermaid, I think I would have enjoyed it more. I think the dreaminess of the story that Harrington has set up, the sort of otherworldliness that Mora has, I think that it would have just all made a lot more sense. And then her sacrifice, it's kind of like a Little Mermaid story, not the movie, but the story, where she ends up throwing herself into the water to save the prince. And that's just what Mora does. So that kind of reminded me of the Hans Christian Andersen story. And I think if he had maybe gone ahead and committed to that, I would have enjoyed it more.
And I see it more as following the same beats as something like Carnival of Souls, which is another dreamy movie, but they wrap that up in the end as being a loop feeding on itself.
Well, I think he was influenced a lot by cat people. We didn't mention that, but that's been mentioned.
I did see that too the first time we watched it, because in Cat People, there's another mysterious woman who's following Simone around and says something in whatever language. She's from Serbia, so I guess it's Serbian. Called her sister.
Sestra.
And that's one of my favorite movies of all time. So I did notice some of the parallels there.
It's not that I don't like the movie. It's just that I think it would have been more fun for me had this been a true myth rather than a, well, you decide situation.
And I think it's stronger being a you decide situation. Because like I said, there's explanations that, yes, she was a mermaid, or no, of course she wasn't a mermaid. Either one of those decisions leaves you with some loose ends that aren't tied up. It can only be tied up by going the other direction.
So it's kind of unsatisfying to me, I guess is what I'm saying. Your mileage may vary, and it obviously does. What did you think of Dennis Hopper in this?
Dennis Hopper is probably a very interesting choice to do this, because this doesn't seem to be a very Dennis Hopper type role.
Well, we're saying that from our perspective, having seen him in so many things since then, right?
This was obviously a very early role for him, yeah.
Yeah.
And the character of Johnny is just so simple. He doesn't understand anything that's going on. He just knows that he likes this girl and pursues her to no end.
Yeah, I didn't like that part very much. Again, looking at it from a 2026 #MeToo perspective, he was really terrible. The way he's in the bar, he's looking for someone to sit next to, and he scans everyone. And it's like, oh, there's a couple. There's a grumpy looking guy sitting by himself. All these seats across from them are empty. There's another couple. Oh, wait, there's a pretty girl. Bingo, I'm going to sit next to her. So he immediately locks in on her. And instead of letting her enjoy the music, he's pestering her right away. And then he follows her home, and she's, what am I going to do? This guy could kill me. You don't know. So you got to play nice. And I don't know, he's real creepy. I don't know what they saw in each other, but they're both very lonely people. So that must be the draw there. And it's the same with Ellen, who's also extremely lonely and seizes on Johnny as a potential mate, especially once his girlfriend has bit the dust, or the sea, as it were. It's
kind of funny. It seems like a small town, but it's just on the outskirts of Los Angeles.
I know. So. Join a club.
Another film this reminded me of was A Little Fugitive, which was made several years earlier. Most of it takes place on Coney Island. And it's this little kid who believes that he murdered his brother. They play a prank on him. So he runs away to Coney Island, and he lives there for a few days.
Yeah, that was cute. I did like the sightseeing aspect of this movie, too. We've been to Santa Monica a few times. Doesn't look like this anymore, but just to look back into what it used to be, it just seems like a really great place to hang out. Obviously, there's a little sinister undercurrent.
A night tide, if you will.
Yeah, a night tide, if you will.
Yeah, and I was trying to pinpoint where certain things were shot based upon my limited knowledge of the area 66 years later. And the scene where Mora is under the pier against the support beams, that looks like the Venice Pier to me, which is 3 miles away from the Santa Monica Pier. So if you know the location, you might have problems with this film because it kind of gives you whiplash from going from place to place.
But even if you know how it is now, that's not what it looked like back then. So maybe not.
One thing that's weird in this story is Captain Murdock's plan to keep Mora around. He tells her about the sea people, and that seems like maybe a good way to get her to drown herself rather than keep her near him.
Well, it worked, if that was the plan.
Well, I don't think he intended for her to drown herself. I would think that that would be an inherent risk in telling the story the way he did.
That sort of leads me to believe that the myth part of it would have been truer, because she must have had some reason not to doubt him. She felt the sea in her veins. She felt the tide calling to her. But there has to be more to it than that. There must have been some sort of physical transformation that she felt in order to make his story plausible.
And I think that if that were the case, when the policeman discovered her, she had the fishtail on. If that was a physical manifestation of her own body.
Well, they'd find that in the autopsy.
Exactly. So more than likely it was a costume. And this was...
psychological mind games?
Exactly. I mean, that's probably what it was. But we still have an explanation for the woman who's wandering around and tormenting Mora the whole time. She's really the loose card here. We don't know what she is or why she's there.
She'd just be a crazy lady who lives on the pier.
And it could be, as Henderson said, that Murdock was just trying to protect her. Because if that's the case, then it's all wrapped up nice and tidy.
Well, he did commit murder for her and then convince her that she had somehow been involved in it. I guess she doesn't need to see things to believe them because she knows she didn't kill those boys.
But she doesn't know that she didn't is the thing.
But why doesn't she know? Is she as dim as Johnny Drake?
Well, somehow Murdock has convinced her that she was being possessed by the will of the sea people and did it.
Without remembering afterwards.
Yeah.
And that guy was messed up.
But to believe that, you have to be pretty dim-witted, I think. So yeah, in a way, I guess Mora and Johnny were perfect for each other, but I think that Ellen is a better match, as long as Johnny likes coffee.
That was so sad that coffee was her personality and loneliness.
I really like Luana Anders, though. I liked her in Reform School Girl. She was Josie. She didn't have a whole lot to do here except serve coffee, but she did it well.
It's not that I need films to be unambiguous. It's just that I wanted this film to be unambiguous because I love fairy tales and I would love to see this as pure modern fairy tale and not a whodunit.
Ending the way it does, you can choose to interpret it that way. And if you don't like fairy tales, you don't have to. We talked about this a little bit during the recap about how the banner was changed at the end where it said alive in all the corners. And then when Johnny returns, those words are gone. And that's kind of like an Easter egg thing where...
they don't point it out to you.
Right. I only noticed it because they mentioned it on the commentary I listened to.
But he wasn't in theaters telling people to, hey, look at that.
No, it's just one of those cool things that you do as a filmmaker. And if people notice, good on them. And if not, oh well, it's all on you.
It's in your subconscious. I did like Linda Lawson in this. I did not like her mullet, but I thought she was really good. I don't know anything about Susan Harrison, whether she would have been better.
Yeah, she has kind of an accent in this. It's very subtle, but it's definitely not an Ann Arbor accent, so I don't know what she was doing. But
Greek.
Yeah, I guess it was supposed to be Greek because she was allegedly found on a Greek island.
She has an otherworldly feel to her as her character.
But besides the accent, I don't know exactly what brings that on, but we're told right away that she might be a mermaid, so that might just be planted into our heads.
Well, she seems very not at home in this world.
Well, she's strange. She serves fish for breakfast.
Exactly.
And she recommends sea urchin. Have you ever had sea urchin?
No.
It's awful. I've had it as sushi. It's called uni. And what it is the reproductive organs of a sea urchin.
Ew.
And it's very chewy and tastes terrible. I don't recommend it.
It's like a pomegranate. I have had pomegranates. They don't sound the same at all.
I wouldn't say they were.
No, I think just has a dreamy quality. Her eyes are always focused off in the far distance.
I wonder how much of a cut she gets of that 25 cents for people to gawk at her with a tail on.
I wonder how many people will go to see her because we never see any kind of crowd outside.
Well, Captain Murdock isn't exactly drumming up a crowd with his, come see the mermaid, 25 cents. Gather around, folks.
Real live mermaid.
Yeah, that's not how you bark.
Well, it seems like in his personal and his professional life, he does not want people to see the mermaid.
Yeah, maybe that's it. If he gives her more money, then she could afford to move out. So
she has more independence with more money.
Yeah.
So now it's time to give a rating to the movie using our AIP scale where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic. Jeff, how do you rate Night Tide?
Well, I think that, as we mentioned, it stole a lot of things from a lot of other movies, but it stole good things from good movies. And I think this made a pretty good movie on its own. I enjoyed the location shooting because it's places that I'm personally familiar with, even though I've seen it many, many, many decades later. And I appreciated that the story didn't just wrap itself up in a little bow. I like that it left us hanging and asking questions. It felt kind of like an art film in that way. And as I said, might be something that I'd see back in film school, but probably not as well done. And I thought this movie was just awesome all the way, and I'm going to give it an A. But I'm curious to see where you rate this one.
I actually really enjoyed watching this movie. It sounds like I didn't because I wanted the story to wrap itself up in the tidy little bow that you didn't. But I can't say that I didn't enjoy this movie. And since, as you said, we can take it however we want, at the end. That gives me permission to say, yes, this was a fairy tale. And yes, there was a lot more to the story than what meets the eye and what satisfies the police. And so taking it that way, the fact that I enjoyed the dreamy fairy tale quality of it, the beautiful locations, even the undersea footage was really beautiful for a black and white film. It still was striking. And the characters in the movie, very simple, but also very otherworldly as well. I just thought this was a really good movie that I think everybody should see. It's kind of a hidden gem even. To me, it's an A movie as well.
Yeah, and I think the fact that it's been in the public domain status for decades now, it's probably overlooked for just that reason.
Well, they made a musical of it, and I wonder what that's like. But I can see it lending itself to musical theater very easily.
Johnny would just be singing, asking dumb questions. I don't understand what's going on.
Why?
Well, if you ever find yourself walking down a foggy pier at midnight and questioning your life choices, you may wonder why you didn't just head over to AIPpod.com, our ever-expanding online museum of all things American International Pictures. There you'll find radio spots to listen to, trailers and galleries of posters and lobby cards for your viewing pleasure. We're also keeping a running list of AIP titles that seem to be lost, or at least lost to us. If you happen to have a lead on where we can find one of these films, you can use the contact form and let us know about it. Or you can just feel free to tell us what you thought of this episode, correct us if we got a detail wrong, or just drop a friendly hey. That's all waiting for you at AIPpod.com.
Now I think it's time for us to roll up our fishtails and get back on the merry-go-round of life. For the American International Podcast, I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in.
Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.